In this video, I'm joined by lawyer Adam Kraut to discuss the biggest threats on the horizon, the Second Amendment, and give you some very tangible things that you and I can be doing to preserve our civil right to defense and freedom. I'm also going to give you the opportunity to get one of our Second Amendment t-shirts. The profits from these guys go to the Firearms Policy Coalition. So you're going to look super sexy, you're going to look dangerous, all while helping to maintain our basic Second Amendment civil rights. It's a limited run, so rush the door on these. But without further ado, guys, I'd like to introduce you to my friend Adam Kraut. Adam is a lawyer with the Firearms Policy Coalition. He is a gun enthusiast, so he's one of us, which is awesome. He is a writer, and he's a spokesperson for Second Amendment issues and advocacy. And he's also a friend. Adam, thanks so much for stopping by, man.
Hey, thanks for having me.
For sure. We wanted to rattle off some questions for you. And I'll dispense with pleasantries, and we'll just immediately answer my questions.
Have at it. It's not every time you get a lawyer sitting here waiting to answer questions.
And I don't know what kind of, am I on the clock right now? Are you going to bill me for this?
No.
I know you're cool, man, but I realize fighting legal battles is very expensive. I totally understand that. What do you believe are the biggest threats to the Second Amendment right now? And not biggest as in like the craziest, but the ones that'll actually maybe pass in the next year.
Well, I think you got to look at the stuff that is quote unquote reasonable, that the average person would look at and say, yeah, why is this a big deal? I can live with that. Why shouldn't everybody, I don't know, have to undergo a background check? Or why should people be able to have these types of things? I think those are the things that we as a community need to certainly be aware of and watch and be very vigilant to guard against. Not to say, who knows, maybe some of those crazy things will actually gain traction too, but it's the stuff that's quote unquote reasonable that I think where you're going to see the most potential for it to go, because, these people are all elected. Their goal is to be reelected, right? And so if you have the average person looking at it going, yeah, okay, I don't see what the big deal is, that I think is truly a bigger problem than most people looking at it going, well, why is my rep or my senator just a lunatic?
Right. So there's a few things that keep me up at night. I was wondering, which is the scariest nightmare for you? One is I went to the Biden-Harris website, and the Biden plan to end gun violence epidemic. This is a horror story of what it would do to the Second Amendment. There's also HR 127, this bill that I'd like to talk about. So aside from just our president's plan for gun control, some radical bills, and then the omnibus packages, which seem to be passing more and more, I worry that all of a sudden huge sweeping gun legislation stuff sneaks into some huge omnibus bill, and all of a sudden we have gun control and we never even saw it happen. Out of those three things, what makes you the most nervous right now?
Well, for me, I think it's the omnibus stuff, because as you said, it gets shoved in with everything else. And let's face it, how many people even know what an omnibus bill is? And so when you have a whole bunch of different topics being shoved into a giant package that's thousands of pages long, that the people passing it don't even know what's in it half the time, that is certainly scary. And I think to me, that's probably one of the scariest things, is that something gets snuck in there. And next thing you know, we wake up and go, well, hold on a second. Nobody even knew about this. The other things are a little more, I guess, easy in the sense of you can at least be aware of them, right? When a bill like HR 127 comes to light, there's no shortage of anybody talking about it. And certainly everybody, if you're not aware that Joe Biden doesn't like guns, I don't know what rock you've been under for the last 50 years, but he's been very clear about that.
Right. And seems really excited to pass as many executive orders as he possibly can.
Yes.
And based on recent clips, doesn't even know what he's signing sometimes, of like, could he just executive order Second Amendment away?
Well, that I would say no. At best, I think there he could certainly order, the administrative agencies to do his bidding, and that could certainly cause problems. Case in point, during the Trump administration and the bump stock ban, he just flat out said, "I'm going to write them out," and did just that. Now, we were the first ones to bring a lawsuit against the government on that exact issue, and we believed it was beyond the scope of his authority. And that's one of the things that, regardless of whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, when they're taking actions that are unconstitutional, we as a community need to be vigilant in guarding against that, because Even if you think it's cool when my guy does it, just remember your guy isn't there forever, and that comes right back around full circle. So I think to that end, he could certainly take some executive action, but whether he could just dispense with it overnight as far as getting rid of the right entirely, that as of where we stand right now, no.
All right, so we, Warrior Poet Society, we're supporting all types of gun activist organizations, Gun Owners of America, Firearms Policy Coalition, Second Amendment Foundation, USCCA. We're in your corner, but I really want to go in. I want to be a better supporter and make sure my dollars go real far. What is the Firearms Policy Coalition doing right now to protect the Second Amendment?
So we, for the past 2 years since I came on board, we've been putting together a legal team with the idea of being able to litigate a number of issues in-house, as well as contribute original research that at the appellate level would mean more and give some insight into the original meaning of what the amendment was. Our interpretation is that you have to look at the Second Amendment as it's the text as informed by history and tradition. And there's a lot of things that we have to go look because the amendment itself is supposed to be understood and in the scope of how it was at the time it was adopted, right? So if your commonly possessed arms were preserved for the right for, to show up, I guess, for militia service or as an individual right, that's how it should still be looked at today. And so one of the things we've done is we've started to implement an aggressive litigation package that we are working on still right now. I've got attorneys that are working on building cases. I've looked at my case board. I have a number of cases that we are going to be bringing. It's a matter of finding the correct plaintiffs and getting everything buttoned up in order to bring them. So it is unfortunately a very time-consuming process. Just because something happens doesn't mean you can necessarily just show up in the court and say, hey, we want to sue over this. There's a couple other things you got to put into place. So that's one of the big things we're doing. Education's another. So we're always keeping our members informed as to what's going on, what they should be aware of, how they can fight back, what they can do to help prevent gun control. And then, of course, just working with others and occasionally some, email blasts to our members and things like that. But we have taken strides to work with other organizations within the space to present a united front. There are cases that we will be bringing where you will see exactly that, where we've contacted other orgs and said, hey, we want to work together. We want to bring these people to the table. Let's all go at this together because we're all in it for the same thing, and that being the preservation and hopefully the restoration of the right itself.
Very good. I want to get on to HR 127, have your thoughts on that and take a real quick 30,000 foot view look at it. But before I jumped in, I just find it prudent to remind all our followers and each other what the Second Amendment is all about. Why is gun control issue such a hot topic? And what really was the commander's intent there for the Bill of Rights Second Amendment?
So if you look at it, and the court was explicitly clear in the Heller decision, if you haven't read Heller, go read it, because the court does an awesome job of recounting the history and how it's understood. And they trace it all the way back to the 13th, 12th century in Europe, and the history of bearing arms, and then what the founders' understanding of it was. And it turns out that their understanding of it was that it was an individual right that was unconnected to service in the militia, that you had a right to self-defense in your home and outside of your home. And Heller says as much, that you have that right. Now, the lower courts have, of course, said that, well, maybe that right doesn't necessarily extend outside the home, and that's a bunch of things that we're currently litigating. So that's where it is. And Heller said it's for firearms that are in common use for lawful purposes. So just because, three guys down the street committed a robbery with something doesn't mean that, that whole category of arms that they utilized are now not constitutionally protected because a few outliers did something something criminal with them.
Right. Copy. Guys, for your benefit, I'm going to go ahead and put a link down below so that you can watch, so that you can take a look at the Heller ruling. Also link to our shirt and to the Firearms Policy Coalition. Here's another call to action. Let's do stuff together. Adam, if it's all right, I'd like to move on to HR 127. You cool?
Let's do it.
Awesome. So this was introduced by Sheila Jackson Lee. I looked through, this is a representative from Texas, Houston area. It looked like she had created about 100 different bills to introduce, and only one of them out of the 100 actually passed the House. This one is a really radical sweep. It looks like it just eviscerate. It's so ridiculously end the Second Amendment. Just everywhere you look, you're like, if it's not just clear and damning, it's ambiguous and vague so that they could get you any way they wanted to. It's like, man, there's no Second Amendment left after this. But given her track record and bills like this, I mean, is this a serious threat? What do you think?
I think what you see embodied in this bill, short of just a total bar on arms, is everything that those who are anti-gun want.
Right.
I think it's right there. This whole idea of, we're not coming from your guns, we're not trying to take away your right. Right here. I mean, it's all right here, and this is one step shy of it, because it has the registration component, it has the licensing component, it has the database. Yep. It requires a psych evaluation, and it requires an insurance that has to be purchased from the government. And we can certainly get into more detail on some of these, but not only is it the embodiment of just one step shy of saying, like, we're just going to take it all from you, it's also incredibly discriminatory against the poor. Those, take, for instance, single mother who is taking the bus to work, right? And let's just say that she's at the poverty level, and somehow she manages to acquire a firearm. She saves up enough money, or somebody in her family gifts one to her, right? And she has, I don't know, a magazine's worth of ammunition. This bill, if it passed, would require her to pay $800 a year to the federal government to maintain insurance. Otherwise, her possession of that exact firearm would be unlawful, ignoring the licensing aspect of it, right? So it's directly discriminatory against those who are poor, likely a lot of minorities, people who are in areas that don't have high incomes. And it's taking away their right to defend themselves with arms that they should have access to. And this insurance aspect of it is just incredibly offensive.
Right. And not to mention, they have to do 24 hours of training to get their license. And then every renewal, it's another 8 hours.
Right.
So even more discriminatory against those at lower incomes. And it's denying a basic civil right to self-defense. Right. And yeah, pretty terrible. What is the most radical stuff in the bill that you saw?
Well, I think the one that will make everybody pull their hair out, and I mean, I don't know if there's just one, but the one that struck me that was the biggest uproar on social media was the registration aspect of it. And not only the fact that it was a registration with the government, but the database that housed all the information would be available and accessible to members of the public. Right. So think about that for a second. Like, let's just talk about what the registration requires. It required the make, model, serial number, who owns the firearm, when it was acquired, not really, like, out of all the things in there, who cares when it was acquired, and then where it is or it will be stored. So now you know who has it, you know where it is or where it's going to be stored, and all that information is accessible to anybody in the public. So let's just think for a moment about people who are not, who are part of the criminal element. Well, if I need to go get an instrument to commit crime, where am I going to go find that? Here's the database. Right.
Yeah, pretty bad. The one that upset me the most was mental fitness. You're going to have a state-sponsored psychologist poking around your house, interviewing your wife. Your ex-spouse can eliminate your Second Amendment right, can talk to other people, your households and friends, anybody. And this person who's already anti-gun gets to decide whether you have a gun. And you can lose it because you're depressed.
Yes.
Or maybe you had a microaggression on social media. Just any excuse they want. Now they've got a complete open door, meaning if they want everyone to fail the license test, they will. DC does this very effectively. How many people have you ever met that have a carry permit in DC?
I don't think I've ever met one, but I did.
I've met one. It's far more rare than meeting an American president. It's like not really that rare, but it's very, very rare and pretty shocking.
I mean, that psychoval aspect of it, I was looking through the bill earlier today, and the one thing that, as you pointed out, this is if the psychologist deems it necessary that they can interview other members of the household. So it's not even a provision that they have to do it. It's if they deem it necessary. And of course, anybody who's looking for any reason to deny you access to firearms would say, "Oh, of course I've got to talk to other people. Maybe they have something that will present you in a negative light there."
Absolutely.
And the mental health part of it too, especially depression, because when you hear the term depression, even clinical depression that's diagnosed, it doesn't mean somebody's suicidal or going to cause themselves harm. Right. So now you're taking away the right to self-defense from people who just might not be, feeling happy all the time and might be struggling with things, but they're not necessarily looking to cause self-harm to themselves or anyone else for that matter.
Yeah. What about brothers in arms, dudes with PTSD stuff? Is that mentally unfit? PTSD?
Well, if you look at the way they've defined some of these things, as you kind of said at the beginning of the intro to us discussing the bill, some of it is very ambiguous, and it allows for, shape shifting, if you will, as to, well, if we can catty corner it over here, why not? The one thing that stuck out to me when I was looking at it was one of the prohibitions was it's unlawful to transfer a firearm to someone who's under 18. Okay, well, if you read the way the bill set out, if it were passed in its current form, you need a license to possess a firearm. You need, in order to be loaned one, and you have to be 21 to obtain the license. So my question was, well, what happens to the people that are in between 18 and 21? Are they just categorically barred? And the bill says nothing about what, if you're between 18 and 21, what happens to you. I think we can all infer what happens, but
prison forever.
Yeah.
Just prison. You wanted a gun, you drew a picture of a gun, you're going to jail.
Yeah, well, and then you look at the penalties. The shortest prison term was, I think it was 1 to 5 years for possession of a so-called large capacity magazine, and the terms go all right, and the terms go all the way up to 40 years imprisonment, and you're looking at fines from anywhere between, I think, $5,000 and $150,000.
So let's show our cards. How many life sentences are in your room right now?
Oh, I don't kiss and tell.
But isn't it crazy? We're living in a day and age when the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. No infringements. Yeah. You get the guns. And now we have to tiptoe around and even admitting publicly that we may or may not have a magazine with 10 rounds or more.
Check out my Instagram. You'll find out.
Oh, very good.
It is certainly fascinating. And I think one thing that people forget, particularly about the Bill of Rights and particularly the Second Amendment, is that those rights were codified in a manner that they're negative, as in, like, it's not that the government granted those rights to you. They were pre-existing, and it's to prevent the government from overstepping its bounds. And yet, whenever we hear people talking about a lot of the rights contained in the Bill of Rights, it's, well, the government allows you to do X, Y, and Z. And that's not the case. And we need to constantly remind people that that's not how it works.
That's right. I love the cognitive dissonance you can get anti-gun folks, where you're like, do you trust the government? And they're like, no. And I'm like, so do you think they should have all the guns?
Yes.
Isn't that the definition of tyranny? And it's like every time it just sideswipes them. It shocks them of like, do you trust government? No. Do you want them to have all the guns then? They're like, no. I'm like, then what should you do? I'm like, we should have guns. I'm like, yes. But it's amazing. In 30 seconds, I've taken anti-gun people to pro-gun people with just that. And the cognitive dissonance is astounding. People just aren't hearing the arguments. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but we have to shake each other and say, we're not the crazy ones here. We're the just plain Jane, down the middle, normal folks, and everyone went radical around us. It's like, protect families with guns, and that's a good thing, and don't like fascism.
Simple concepts, right? Like, should be taught in elementary school everywhere, and yet people with college degrees have trouble comprehending some of these theories.
No, we got Common Core now. We're good. Very good. What I wanted to do is move into what we can actually do about this stuff. We got radical bills, and maybe parts of this will one day pass, or the bill in its entirety, which I doubt. I hope. I keep overestimating the American people and what will actually fall for. So you never know, but I do know that we do need to hold the line. We need to make sure that we're behind organizations like FPC. But what can we do, the normal person, to help this fight not go the way of tyranny?
So I've always been a very vocal proponent of being involved in the political process. And I get pushback on this all the time. People say, well, why bother? I live in a blue district, or, yeah, I don't think my representative or senator cares what I have to say. But you live in a country where you have the right to be part of that process. I would encourage you to take advantage of it, make your voice heard. And if the person who's elected to represent you isn't listening, go support someone else for office. Go be involved at the ground level. Other things you can do, you can find groups that you look at their work, you evaluate the work they're doing, and you say, hey, you know what? I like what these guys are doing. Not just what they say they're doing, but I'm looking at the end product of it, or the work product. Go support them. As you said at the beginning of this, all this stuff costs money to do. Litigation ain't free, and it sure as heck ain't cheap, especially when you're getting good attorneys to do the work. And the cost to litigate a case at the district court level can sometimes exceed $30,000-$40,000, and that's just for the trial court at the federal level. That doesn't include the appeals and then what it takes to go on to SCOTUS. So by the time you're done, you could be looking at $150,000 to $200,000 or more dollars spent on just a single case. Wow. And the stakes are pretty big. So obviously financial support's another way. And then I would say the last thing is just talking to people. I've always found in my experience that if you talk to people, you hear them out, give them a chance to talk, and then you say, well, hey, what about this? Just kind of as you did, right? Well, should government have all the guns? And let them get to the end result, but lead them to the water and let them make it their own.
And be nice. Be nice. Be cool.
Yeah.
Don't be the monster they accuse you of. Just be a normal, chill person that wants to protect family. It's not a big deal.
It costs nothing to be nice to people, and you'd be amazed at how far it gets you with people. So I would tell you, just talk to people, show them the ropes, invite them to be part of it, and get them to change their mind through showing them that, look, this thing isn't as evil as you were taught to be.
Got it.
I did that with my own family, right? Like, I grew up in a house where guns were not something we had. There was a very negative view. When I turned 18, I bought a shotgun and I brought it home. And it was, a couple of years of battling with my parents before they kind of came around to where I was on the issue and said, hey, you know what? Maybe you're not wrong. Wow. So in my experience, it's been a thing. I know other people have differing ones, but that's what I would suggest.
Got it. So those were 3 suggestions. One is grassroots, just conversation with neighbors, friends, coworkers, family. The second thing was funding. Obviously, that's required. And the very first one you said, the third in my list, though, is getting involved politically. So that one is the one that I have the most personal difficulty with, because I just don't feel like calling my representatives or emailing them is really changing anything. I'm told, and I have evidence to believe that it does work, but help me overcome my unbelief.
Well, I'll do my best, but what I can tell you is that they do tally the votes internally in their office. They do see where their constituents lie on the issues, and their sole goal most of the time is to get reelected, right? So if you start beating them up, and maybe not just gun stuff, but everything, and other people start beating them up, and then you go find somebody to go run against them, or you support somebody to go run against them, and they're at the risk of losing their seat, they might start having second thoughts about how they're going to vote on things. But it requires people to be involved. And that's really the problem, if you will. People think that their time spent doing it isn't worth the time that they have to invest in it for the result that they may get.
Got it. What about online petitions? Is that a good route forward? I mean, you got calling them, you got emailing them, and then you got online petitions. What do you think?
I've never been a big fan of them, but I don't know what the result of that is. I mean, I know for instance, the White House petitions go back to the Obama administration, and those, I don't even think things that he would have supported that people wrote petitions for wherever any action was ever actually taken on them. I can't speak to at least online petitions as to the effectiveness of those.
But calling and emailing your Congress people, that works.
My understanding from talking to individuals who have worked in legislative offices, both at the state and federal levels, have said that they do record all of that.
Fantastic. Jackie in your office, a friend of the society's as well, mentioned from her time in politics that if you're calling in, that absolutely helps because they need to clear those phones out. And if they keep getting badgered about it over and over, it forces them to listen. And it really does have a felt impact. And she mentioned that to me. I thought it'd be good to just go ahead and recount for all you guys listening out there because I need to hear that what I'm doing and what I believe is actually making a difference. So, yeah, good times, man.
Good times, man.
Well, I mean,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Real quick, to sum up that point, I've posted pictures in the past of my call logs. It takes all 5 minutes to call when I've called both my federal and state elected officials. It's been 5 minutes worth of work. You can do it on your way home from work, or well, I guess now from the couch to wherever you're headed because most of us are working from home. But
yep. For sure. Adam, thanks so much for joining us. All you guys listening in, please go ahead and help support Firearms Policy Coalition. You can donate to them direct, or you can get this super dope shirt, limited run. All the profits are going to FPC as they lead the charge to preserve the Second Amendment. And so, guys, make sure you train hard, train smart, and stay free. Adam, thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
See you guys.